February 1st, boxing fans are getting a fight that is incredible. While boxing has been making fights, Turkey Al Sheikh, all these promotional companies working together, making these great fights, we're getting a fight on February 1st that actually might be the best out of all the fights that have been announced or made. We're getting a fight that we probably didn't think we were going to get this early on. There was rumors, talks about it, but it's like, no, the way boxing's been, it's going to get pushed back a little and eventually they'll fight. No, both men took the challenge and are getting in the ring on February 1st. We got David Benavidez, the Mexican monster, who just seems to knock out anything in front of him, making his second fight at 175 against a great opponent in David Morrell. David Morrell has been calling out Benavidez for years, the same way Benavidez has been calling out Canelo. Morrell's been right behind Benavidez doing the exact same thing to him, and we got these two in the ring. I'm going to talk about how we got to this because, trust me, all the fans, all they wanted was this fight. And at first, that wasn't going to happen. But kudos to both Benavidez and Morrell. They heard what the fans wanted and said, okay, we'll make one of the best fights in the sport of boxing. And if you look at the first 4 months of the year, there's not a better fight, period, on the schedule. And even if we want to go past the 4 months, I know we're talking about May scheduling for a lot of these fights, still the best fight. I think this has the opportunity to be a top 3 fight for 2025. Benavidez versus Morrell. Get ready. February 1st, it's going down in Las Vegas. Let's talk about it right now. But before we get into it, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and comment below. Who do you think wins this fight? Let me know in the comments who do you think and why they win this fight. But back to the fight itself. Benavidez versus Morrell. If you're a boxing fan, you know what this is all about. This is all action at every moment, and the bad blood is there. If you like fights with trash talk and animosity between the two, this is your fight. This is your fight. As if you've seen the media days, the scrums, the back and forth they've had. These guys don't like each other. They say it's personal. David Benavidez, said, I'm going to knock his effing head off because it's personal. These two don't like each other, and in the ring, it's going to show. First, let's talk about each fighter before we get into more details. David Benavidez, 29-0. Perfect. 24 knockouts, 28 years old, 6'2", with a 74.5-inch reach. As I think the reach might play a factor because we'll talk about Morrell's reach as well, because Morrell has the advantage in that department. But first, David Benavidez's last win was against Alexander Vodstick. That was his first fight at 175. One thing that is good about this fight is both fighters are accustomed to 175. It would have been, I wouldn't have been a fan if, say, Benavidez had been at 175 and Morrell, this was his first fight there, because it is a weight jump, 7 pounds. But as I'll talk about it, Morrell's last fight was also at 75, so they both have one fight at 175, understand the weight, understand what they have to do in training to get to that weight. Obviously going to be easier than cutting down to 68, but I'm glad both fighters have been accustomed to 75. For Benavidez, Alexander Vodstick, that was on the Tank Davis versus Frank Martin undercard. He was the co-main for that. That's kind of how they built the fight. Tank is the main, Benavidez is the co-main. Benavidez got the unanimous decision. Was dominant on the scorecards, won every scorecard pretty handedly, but a lot of people criticized the performance from Benavidez, and while I know it wasn't a perfect performance, and he was saying beforehand, I'm gonna get the knockout, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, and he wasn't able to. It looked like he did gas out in the later ends of the fight. It looked like he wasn't throwing as many combinations as we're accustomed to seeing Benavidez throw, and I think a lot of it was because of the weight jump. I think it was him getting accustomed to 175, and we have to get credit to Vostik. He is a great opponent. He's not just some guy you walk into at 75 and you're like, oh, this guy is just, you're going to walk right over him. No, that's just not Vostik. He's been around. He's put up some good fights. And Benavidez, I thought, put a good showing on for 75. And granted, if that's how we were to fight, per se, in this fight and other fights at 75, he might get beat because he did get tired and he did stop throwing some punches and he did get hit a little bit. But it wasn't bad. It was a good inaugural performance at 175. I know a lot of people aren't huge fans of it, but it is what it is. And I thought against the opponent that Vostok was, I thought it was a solid performance. For David Morrell, I mentioned he's 27, so a year younger, only a year younger than David Benavidez. But they say young because you look at his record, 11-0, 9 KOs. He's really just catching up now in the professional ranks, but people knew his skills. That's why it wasn't absurd when he was calling out Benavidez only being 9-0, right? He was calling out Benavidez back in 2023 when he knocked the dude out in the first round on the co-main for the Tank vs. Ryan fight. Like I mentioned, 11-0, 9 KOs, 27 years old, height 6'1", so he's an inch shorter, but he makes up for it in reach, 78.5-inch reach. For Morrell, I do think jabbing will be a huge factor in this fight. And he said it himself. Benavidez is like RoboCop per se, walking forward. I'm just going to walk forward. If that's the case, jab and keep Benavidez from being able to walk you down the entire fight. Because Benavidez does, of course, like to walk down his opponents, likes to impose his power on them. For David Morrell, while he needs to show he does have power to keep Benavidez from just blindlessly walking towards him, walking forward on him, having the jab will also set up different shots. And for Morrell, I'll talk about this in a little bit later. For him, he can move. He can use the angles, set up the jab, and then use his footwork to get around Benavidez. So I think the reach will play a key factor if Morrell lets it play a key factor. If he doesn't, then I think he'll allow Benavidez to walk him down, which I don't think is always a good recipe. For David Morrell, his last fight, I mentioned it was also his first fight at 175, was a unanimous decision win against Radivojo Kaujic. Excuse me if I did pronounce the name incorrectly. That was on the undercard of the Terence Crawford Israel Madrimov card back on August 8th. So they both fought within a couple months of each other at 175. I thought, again, this was kind of a similar aspect for Morrell. Dominated on the scorecards, but didn't look great. For Morrell, it might have been 175. It was kind of a weird card. The fight was outside. It was a weird card, so I think, if I remember correctly, he was one of the earlier fights, so like the sun was cutting in half the ring. Obviously, that it's not going to affect your performance, but it's weird. It's just a weird feeling for David Morrell, and I think for him, again, it was like Benavidez, getting accustomed to 175. I think he thought he was going to get his opponent out a lot earlier than he would. In the end, he didn't get his opponent out of there. So I think for Morrell, it was a good lesson for 175. But we've seen what he can do at 168. Again, for both of these guys, I'm not worried about it. They're both the mandatory for the winner of Beterbiev versus Bivol if they win this fight. The winner's the mandatory for the winner of Beterbiev versus Bivol. They know the performance they put up in their inaugural 175 fight doesn't beat each other, meaning Benavidez or Morrell, or it's not going to be the winner of Beterbiev versus Bivol. They know that. So again, I'm not banking too hard on the past 175 fight. If it shows up that maybe they have a hard time in this fight, then that's an issue. But for now, we've seen the damage they've done at 68. We've seen the damage that they've done. I'm not too worried about what they didn't do per se in that 175 fight, because I think it's all going to show up in this fight. And the reason because of that is the buildup and the animosity for these two. I keep talking about the animosity. It's been brewing, right? So if you look at it, these two were number 2 and number 3 at 168. Canelo was 1, Benavidez was 2, Morrell was number 3 at 168 in those rankings. Benavidez was calling out Canelo. We know this, still calling out Canelo. That fight's not going to happen. Sad to say, but not going to happen. But while Benavidez was calling for Canelo, Morrell was also calling out for Canelo, but he knew, I can also get Benavidez. I can jump the standings. I can get Benavidez. So he's been calling out Benavidez for a while. Benavidez, he's like, why am I worried about him? Come on. Dude doesn't have many professional fights. I'm going for Canelo. I've proven I'm the guy that should be fighting Canelo. I'm looking forward, not backwards. So that fight was always, eventually, I think Canelo said, hey, why don't Benavidez and Morrell fight? Well, for Benavidez, there was no real reward in it. A lot of people would say, hey, the dude's only got 9, 10 professional fights. You beat him. Okay, but the risk is really high because Morrell has seemed to be a really good fighter. So the risk was for Benavidez wasn't worth it. And you can't blame him because he thought for a long time he might get that Canelo fight. Obviously, that doesn't happen. Benavidez says, I'm not waiting around for Canelo my entire career. I'm going up to 175. Morrell also moves up to 75. They both have their first fights at 75, which I mentioned. And Benavidez is talking, what's my next fight going to be? Rumors and reports say, hey, Benavidez facing Jesse Hart in December of 2024. Fans, nope, they don't like that. Which, for Benavidez, unfortunate because, hey, not too many options. Not a lot of people want to face Benavidez also. And for Benavidez, I think he was maybe looking at it. I'm still getting acclimated at 175. He also said he had some injuries. I believe he had a cut that opened not too long before the Bostic fight he said that happened. So that also affected his performance. I think he was looking for, hey, let me get healthy at 75 and maybe then I'll call out Beterbiev and Bivol. But the fans said, no, we don't want Jesse Hart. And Benavidez, credit to him, there's few like him. There's few like him in the sport. He came out and said, okay, I hear what you're saying. Give me a little bit. Because before, quick negotiations were like, hey, Benavidez Morrell might happen. Both teams said, no, that's not happening. So Benavidez said, just give me a little bit. Didn't say a name. Just said, give me a little bit. I want the fans to be happy. I'll try and make a good fight. Then we get the announcement. David Benavidez versus David Morrell, signed, sealed, and delivered for February 1st, 2025. Everyone's like, whoa, is this legit? Because you two were talking and then weren't talking, and then you was going to face someone else. Is this legit? Yeah, it's legit. Benavidez versus Morrell signed for February 1st, and both guys can't wait. Immediately, we're like, yeah, it's time. This other guy's been talking. This other one hasn't given me a chance. Time to show him it's my turn at 75. I'm not waiting around for Canelo, the big dog, at 68. It's my time to make a legacy at 75 and make the other one pay for either talking about me or making me wait. And talking's what they've been doing. The trash talk has been spectacular. I've mentioned it. There's been trash talk since the beginning. They're doing their promo before the first, I believe, press conference for this fight. They had them go face to face. That clip went viral. They immediately were talking trash. Then there was a media day in Miami. If you saw this, which was interesting, it was kind of just a random media day. I was a fan of it because guess what? It gave us more access to the fighters and more clips. As Benavidez walks in, he goes to shake Morrell's hand. Morrell doesn't shake his hand. Benavidez goes, okay. He kind of understands it, smiles. They face off. Benavidez slowly taking off the watch, handing it to one of his boys, taking off the belt, I believe, hands it to one of his boys, just shoves Morrell. Then chaos ensues. Morrell grabs his belt, throws it at Benavidez. Two obviously have to be separated, then have a mini sort of press conference going back and forth. Benavidez saying, I'm going to break your effing face. Morrell saying, you're RoboCop. Ooh. Which is interesting because Benavidez has heard the RoboCop comparisons, walk forward, hands up. Interesting because I mean, that's a way for Benavidez or Morrell to win this fight. I'll talk about that in just a second. But this fight's been incredible. I mean, we're looking up at fight week, and this fight's going to be the build-up. If you're a casual fan, I'm saying tune into this fight. This is going to be fireworks, and the card is great as well. But this main event, oh, it's going to be fireworks. I can't wait. Obviously, you see my tone. You see how excited I am for this fight. You see how boxing is excited for this fight. And then again, you get two guys that can't stand each other. It's incredible. But let's talk about how they win this fight, in my prediction. So David Morrell, he's got to use footwork. And this is what I talked about earlier on when he talks about Benavidez being the RoboCop. For Morrell, you have to anticipate David Benavidez walking you down. You just have to anticipate that because that's what he seems to do to dang near almost all his opponents. So for him, I mentioned it, the jab and use the footwork to create angles. If he's walking you down like this, you jab and then you get around to the side of him and you're able to throw maybe a body shot and land a hook. That's going to keep Benavidez twisting and turning, moving, and not being able to set and throw. For Benavidez, I think the key in this fight is going to be body shots. I think body shots are what's going to slow down Morrell in this fight. Because for my prediction, I think Morrell's coming out fast and hot in this fight. I think Morrell's going to, for lack of a better word, almost dominate the first 4 to 5 rounds. I think Benavidez, kind of similar to the Caleb Plant fight. I see this sort of in the way it scores, in the way that fight, the ups and downs of it, kind of similar to David Benavidez versus Caleb Plant. I see David Morrell coming out fast, banking some of those early rounds. Benavidez kind of looking maybe not flustered, but still trying to figure stuff out. David Morrell's got to prove that, one, his power is legitimate, so Benavidez thinks twice about just walking forward recklessly, and two, make sure he has the stamina. Because winning the early rounds is great, but if Benavidez feels not only you don't have the power, but necessarily can't take the power of Benavidez's punches, Benavidez is just going to walk you down and start teeing off. So for Benavidez, I think the body shots on Morrell, that's what's going to cause him to slow down. I think if you get in on the inside and you can throw some body shots to slow down Morrell, I think that's going to be huge. I think that's what's going to really slow down David Morrell from not only jabbing, but moving around. I think the body shots will keep him from moving around because he's trying to conserve energy as you get in the later rounds for Benavidez. And then that's when your opportunity to walk forward and kind of tee off on him. I want to see Benavidez combos. He's had knockout combos in the past. Obviously, I don't think necessarily you're going to get the knockout combo that you've seen from him in the past. If you can get combinations and kind of makes Morrell take a step back, whoa, that's huge. And I think the experience for David Benavidez is going to be huge in this fight. Huge. I think Morrell, great fighter, great young in his career fighter. He hasn't fought in this stage. Benavidez has fought in this stage. Caleb Plant was a huge fight. I'll give him Boo Boo was a huge fight as well. Demetrius Andrade, that was a huge fight. So for Benavidez, he's fought in these fights. He knows from that back to that Caleb Plant fight. Okay, even if I lose those first few rounds, I can come back. You think back to that Plant fight, you think about him dominating those later rounds. You don't think about Caleb Plant winning those early rounds. You think about him dominating in those later rounds. So while I don't know if we're going to see that sort of domination, because I don't think Morrell's going to allow Benavidez to tee off on him like Caleb Plant was getting teed off on him. I do think it's going to be similar to Benavidez finding his rhythm in those mid rounds in the fight. For me, I think Benavidez is going to get a decision win. I was debating whether I think it's going to be a stoppage or a decision. If it was going to be a stoppage, I think it would be in the later rounds, 10 to 12. But you know what? I'm going decision. I think both have good power, great power. But I think both have enough power to keep each other off from delivering the final blow, if that makes sense. I think that one might get stunned, but I think he'll have enough power where the other is going to be reluctant to get in there and try and finish the show. But then again, we see the animosity between the two, so they might run in recklessly and run into one. We don't know. But for me, I think Benavidez is going to get a decision win. I don't know if it's going to be UD, SD, MD, split decision, majority decision, or unanimous decision, but I'm going Benavidez by decision in this fight. And I think it's going to be a shootout. I wouldn't be mad if this is a 7-5 type fight and we're saying we need a rematch because some people think Morrell won, some people think Benavidez won, or some people think there's a draw. I wouldn't be mad at that. I think it's going to be that close of a fight. And I think both guys are going to be throwing haymakers throughout. I think Morrell, obviously, like I mentioned, going to start off strong. Benavidez find his way. Then him and Morrell kind of go back and trade rounds as they've kind of worked their energy tired. And just two titans of the sport just slugging it out. I can't wait for this fight on Saturday. This fight's going to be incredible. I'm excited. I'm sure a lot of you are excited. Again, comment below. Who do you think wins? Do you think it's going to be a decision. I don't care. Do you think it's going to hit the final bell in the 12th round? Do you think someone's getting knocked out? I'm not mad if you think someone's getting knocked out because both throw with bad intentions. Man, it's going to be a great fight. I mean, I tell you, there's fights being made right now that are incredible. And there's fights to be made that are incredible. I don't think there's a better fight on the schedule than Benavidez versus Morrell. It's one of those, if you're a boxing fan, you're tuning into this one. And again, I mentioned the card is great. Very good undercard. You see the rematch of Cool Boy Steph versus Brandon Figueroa, Isaac Pitbull Cruz on the card. We have a good card and a great night of boxing incoming on February 1st. Personally, I got Benavidez by decision. Let's see if it gets upgraded to a KO or Morrell comes and pulls off the upset. Either way, I can't wait for this night of boxing. February 1st, Saturday. Make sure you tune in. This has been the Never Drop Podcast. Make sure you like this video. Comment below. Let me know again, who do you have winning in this fight and how do you have them winning? Hit that subscribe button to the Never Drop Podcast. I got all your information, all the boxing news going on. I got all of it. We'll be in Brooklyn for Tank versus Lamont Roach and that card. Make sure you subscribe for all your boxing news. That's all I got for you. Benavidez versus Morrell, February 1st. It's going to be a great night of boxing in Las Vegas. Hit that subscribe button. All I got for you. Peace. I'm out.